And welcome to a football show on the 440 Sports Network. Jared Stillman in for Braden Gall. Paul Kuharsky here from paulkuharsky.com and the Paul Kuharsky podcast presented by Sinkers Beverages. I know it's your local liquor store. People love Sinkers Beverages. Paul, I was on your side when it came to Sinkers Beverages when Braden was talking about THC drinks, which I do drink, and he was talking about that still being part of Dry January. I thought that was ridiculous, and I was glad that you stood up for what was right. PK, how are you?
We were in agreement on that. I'm well. Busy day. I hope fans take some satisfaction. I don't know that anybody else has signed 8 players today, 9 if you count Morgan Cox. We can certainly debate the quality of some of them, but people dying for action on the first day of free agency. Titans certainly delivered that for their people today.
Okay, the Titans, as far as what they did today, the guys that everybody thought they were going to sign, they signed. Wan'Dale Robinson, 4 years, $78 million, $38 million guaranteed. John Franklin Myers, 3 years, $63 million. I believe that's $42 million guaranteed. Alante Taylor, 3 years, $58 million, $42 million guaranteed. Cordale Flott, 3 years, $45 million, $32 million guaranteed. PK, I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't know who that was before today. But Daniel Bellinger, 3 years, $24 million, $14 million guaranteed. And then a 2-year deal for Mitch Trubisky. Do we have any details on that Trubisky deal? I was looking and I couldn't find any of them.
Well, you know what that means. If you can't find numbers today, they are not good numbers by any means. I can't say that I hunted for any. And a lot of people, let's start off with this, are asking me, and they're probably asking you, how much cap money is left? They don't have a very good understanding of this. We need to know the first year numbers of these deals to be able to compute something like that. And the first year numbers of these deals won't be out for 3 days in many instances. And with the Titans, the way they drag their feet on finishing off at dotting the I's and crossing the T's and stuff, could be 5 days on some of them. So we don't know how much cap money they have left. It's not the total value of the deal that's being put out, all of these favorable to the players, the way they're being spelled out. It's the cap value of the first year of the deal that chips away at their $99 million or whatever they have.
You know what, too? I think it's an embarrassing day, or it's more of like this, and you bitch about this all the time, and I don't disagree with you when you do, but like these insiders, the insiders that make a lot of money and they're on television, and it's like, oh my God, every day they bring Schefter on TV and they're like, Shefty, what are the Cowboys going to do at the deadline? And then Schefter says, so he wastes time saying something that doesn't mean anything. I mean, all these deals are, the deal was done by Todd France of Athletes First. And it's like, it's so obvious that it's just the agent just texts the insiders and copy and paste and they put it in there. And I think it's embarrassing.
He says who the deal is done by, because I think, that's a step short of cutting Schefter out of the process and Todd France just saying what the deal is, which is how it should work, because that's what is actually happening. Because these guys, insiders, are all just middlemen, but they're amplification devices for the agents, basically.
PK, lead us off. How do you feel about the Titans' day so far?
I mean, look, the depth chart was empty. And the depth chart is no longer empty. Now, how good are the bodies that they've filled them with? I mean, I think Wan'Dale Robinson is an interesting player, right? I've heard you harp about him, not a touchdown scorer or whatever. Are they better with Wan'Dale Robinson in the slot? Yeah. Could they have found another guy or two who would have been as good or maybe better there? Probably. Bellinger. I like the idea of Bellinger. I like moving away from Chigakonkwo to an actual big tight end that when you go too tight with Gunnar Helm will force people out of nickel, which Chig didn't do. But would I preferred Charlie Kolar instead of the one that Brian Daboll knows? Probably. I haven't compared the money there. John Franklin Myers is a good interior defensive player. 7.5 sacks from an interior defensive guy not named Jeff Simmons is very good. Jeff Simmons has had very good seasons with 7.5 sacks. That's a good signing. The cornerbacks, look, they're NFL starting cornerbacks. The Titans had none. Today they have 2. They both have deficiencies. They don't have big interception numbers. Flott is very tall at 6'2", and incredibly skinny at 185. Alontae Taylor's given up a lot of touchdowns. They both need to play better than they've played. They expect our defensive front, they'll say, is going to pound the quarterback. The ball's going to be out quick. These guys are going to be opportunistic and physical. It remains to be seen, what they'll be. But yesterday, the Titans had no starting cornerbacks, and today they have two guys that were pretty well regarded by the market. The two offensive linemen that came late, they're not starting caliber guys unless they really play well in training camp and beat out people who remain to be named. So, Trubisky, if you like a veteran quarterback who, might or might not do something for you, I'm more into upside. I think, the standard veteran failed starter who comes in and is your backup is very limited. I know he's good in the room and all of that stuff. I prefer the idea of Will Levis. I don't know why everybody hates the idea of Will Levis. Will Levis, to me, has some upside. And if your quarterback goes down, I'd rather play a young guy that's got some potential upside than play a guy that you know exactly what you're going to get out of him. And I think Trubisky falls in that basket. But if they like him, I hope he's a good quote.
I guess like Franklin Myers, I think is a good player. And did they probably overpay for him? Sure, but that's free agency. I mean, when I saw Jalen Phillips off the board at 120 over 4, I was like, this day is going to get crazy. And then I saw the Linderbaum numbers come in, and I'm like, this day is going to get out of control. So Franklin Myers, I mean, it is what it is. But he's a good player, and he's going to help them sack the quarterback. Wan'Dale Robinson, I'm a little torn on because I really think that Cam's biggest problem is his accuracy down the field. Like, I feel like 1 out of every, 10 throws down the field is an accurate, incredible highlight reel play, and people just latch on to that 1 out of 10, but the other 9 he's going to miss. And with having a short target like Wan'Dale Robinson that he can just kind of dump the ball off to as a slot, I think that is going to help Cam. I don't understand the Titans jumping out there to sign a tight end. I know he worked with Brian Daboll, but a tight end who's never been targeted more than 38 times in a season. And it's like, could you have waited a couple days and then signed a tight end who's out there that you wouldn't have to commit $8.99 million to in year 1 cash? So I don't.
Well, I mean, here's where you and I have a general disagreement. I think they're going to throw more to Bellinger, who is a big guy who runs well for a big guy with the ball in his hands. He's not Chig. Chig was a pitiful run blocker. Titans fans, of course, fall in love with their guys. Oh, Chig, what are we going to do without Chig? What you're going to do without Chig is actually see a tight end block for the run game in an effective way. You're going to see teams go into base defense, so it changes what happens with 2 tight ends against when you put 2 tight ends against the field, which is coming back into vogue. I don't know about Bellinger's money, but I think he can be what you're seeing around the league, which is a more conventional tight end who's got a more well-rounded game. He can catch some balls and do some damage, but it's not his primary thing, and they'll actually hopefully have wide receivers to do that for once in the Titans' life. They need to work on that continually. I agree with what you're saying about Robinson. Shorter target, needs to yak. He's got a 6.3 average depth of target in his career, but it was up to 8.5 last year. So he's ascending, hopefully. And I'm going to allow for these guys to be better in what they're doing. I know we're heading towards this. It seems kind of silly that such a high percentage of these guys are connected to Daboll. Now, it's too much to say they're reconstructing the Giants, but and I put out a reel about this early in the day after they had only signed, 2 after Robinson and Bellinger. I think coaches increasingly around the league, head coaches, leaning on their coordinators, want guys they know, right? I don't have to teach as much. There's not as much of an air of mystery. My clock is short. I got to hit the ground running. So I got to have guys I believe in. Rustin Webster, for what he was worth, used to talk about how you don't know these free agents. It's way worse than the draft because you don't have the interview process and all of that stuff. And so I think these guys fear the unknown. They lean on the known. We saw it with John Robinson, right? Pretty
Sure.
good with Logan Ryan and Malcolm Butler. Not so good with Deion Lewis. That was a GM, not a coach. With Callahan, they brought in a whole bunch of guys that all of them knew, and the returns were pretty lousy. Awuzie, Boyd, Sadiq Charles didn't even stick around. Sebastian Joseph Day, reasonably good player. Ridley, jury's still out. Jamal Adams later, they didn't have any expectations, but he didn't do anything. What are the returns on that? They need far better returns from this gang of people that they know. And who did they sign today that they didn't know?
Alante Taylor.
Alante Taylor and Cordell Volson. I think there's some little overlap with Cordell Volson.
Well, I mean,
it's a little too much.
Vrabel did the same thing. I mean, last year in New England, yes. Outside of Stephon Diggs, Spillane, Landry, Carlton Davis played for Detroit, where Terrell Williams was, and Morgan Moses played for the Jets, where Todd Downing was. And so
Gibbons on the field again.
They got a lot of Vrabel guys, but then they spin on Milton Williams and they spin on Stephon Diggs, both of whom I don't think had some sort of prior connection to them. It doesn't bother me so much that this entire team is all coming together with guys that Dable and Saleh have coached, but I do think that they needed to overpay for an impact player who would come in and be one of their better 5 players because the state of their roster was so bad. And that's what the Raiders have done with Linderbaum and Nakobe Dean. And I really wanted that with a Hendrickson or a Linderbaum or somebody like that.
Would you have gone there with Linderbaum to that number? Would you have gone to that number with Pierce? Those are awfully big numbers.
I would not have gone there with Pierce. I think I probably would have with Linderbaum.
I think they probably thought about it, but we don't know what their center plan is right now. The second tier of centers, Posick and Fortner, who I heard they might be interested in, didn't move to what I know today. So we'll see. But those centers shriveled up in a hurry. The centers shriveled up before free agency even started. When your guy Biotish went to the Chargers before the period even started because he was eligible, and Bradbury got traded, and McGovern re-signed, and boom, all of a sudden the 5 guys you're looking at, it's down to 2 guys.
Here's what I guess I don't, and this is just not me believing in this is how you build a team. I don't put a lot of value into cornerback play in today's NFL. Now, if there's a guy like a Surtain or a Gonzalez, one of the top of the league kind of corners, I think those guys make a difference. But the way the rules are now, Vrabel used to talk about this all the time, which was the way the rules are now, the corners just can't be physical with the receivers anymore. So I just believe in spending the valuable resources on pass rushers. And then I would say take all the guys that are starting caliber corners, the Roger McCreary type players of the world, wait a couple of days, and then sign 2 of those guys. Clearly, Robert Saleh, who does know more about defense than I do, he clearly values cornerback play because they spent a boatload of money on corners, but I just wouldn't build a team that way. I don't think these are bad corners. I think there's too much of a premium spent today on corners.
Well, I don't overall disagree with you, but I think you got to have some kind of defensive presence. And if you, and you have to go somewhere in this market because they just have too many places to draft now, and to go cheap. They're still going to fill in a lot of places cheap. They need another wave of defensive linemen still here. They started to go with the cheaper offensive linemen here. They're getting ahead of the curve. Some of these things move faster in free agency. Schlottman and Volson, once upon a time, nobody would have ever thought about them on the first day of free agency. Things are accelerating now, and the Titans are so hell-bent on fleshing out, putting human beings, putting flesh and blood on their roster, that they have to do it now. And I think the kind of corners you're talking about are still to come because behind these 2 guys and Harris, there still is nothing. And that's half a room, not even.
What do you think today meant for Calvin Ridley? Do you think the Robinson deal means Ridley is out? Do you think they're working on another receiver? And if they get the other receiver, then they say goodbye to Ridley? Do we think it's going to be Ridley and DK on the outside and Robinson in the slot? What do you make of the Ridley situation?
Yeah, I still don't know. I had heard Romeo Dobbs was somebody that they liked. Certainly there could be other people that haven't come to light yet. But I do think, and I wrote yesterday about L'Jarius Sneed and about Ridley, their financial implications don't come into play until 5 days into the new league year, which is technically next Monday, a week from today. Usually you don't want to string a guy along, but in Sneed's case, there's a health issue probably. And in Ridley's case, you got to put your own interests ahead of him. So you'd like, if you're going to cut him, to give him a chance on the market, but they truly might not know. If there's another receiver they want, it would change the room and it would probably mean that he's out on the numbers game. But if they don't get that guy, it would probably mean that he's in. And so I think he just kind of has to hang by a thread for a little while here. That's my interpretation of it.
I mean, they can't worry about doing right by Calvin Ridley. They have to do what's best for the Titans.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's why guys negotiate that in their deals about, like for instance, AJ Brown has $4 million guaranteeing on the 5th day of the league year for the next year, so that you have to make a decision ahead of time. And if he could have negotiated that, I don't have an issue with that.
Fifth day. It's 5th day. It's not 1st day.
What about Cody Barton, inside backer? Do we think he and Cedric Gray, we had talked about them being in the market. I saw that Quincy Williams from the Jets, who I thought might be a guy Saleh might circle a little bit. Dre Greenlaw got cut. He is a former 49er. Maybe he's in there. I think Cody Barton is too slow.
He's slow. And they want 2 fast guys who can, based on what Saleh's done in the past, that cover. Pretty much first and foremost. They're not looking for a thumper. Barton's closer to that than he is a cover guy, right? They've undervalued this position throughout their entire existence, outside of Randall Godfrey, really, and then some picks in recent years. Jayon Brown and David Long were good players, not great. David Thornton was a great inside linebacker. Those are the 2: Randall Godfrey, David Thornton. That to me, the strong side linebacker is a very part-time player off the field in nickel, not even a part of it. I'm not even thinking about that spot. I think weak side is Cedric Gray, and the middle is what you're looking for. I can't see Cody Barton. I mean, even if that's the weakest person on your 11, I don't like the sound of Cody Barton in this defense. I don't know that you have to cut him. I think he could be a good special teamer for you and reasonable depth. Again, you create another need if you get rid of him. Then you're looking for 2 in my mind. You're already looking for 1, I think. But I don't know that you're getting Devin Lloyd quality.
So what bothers me about kind of the way that it went today is I think they need another starting edge rusher, unless they think that they can start.
I mean, I just did a depth chart, and I left the other end spot blank still. Right guard's blank, center's blank. The other edge opposite Johnson is blank.
Okay, so are we going to sit here today and say that's David Bailey, that's Reuben Bain, that's Arvell Reese, or do we think they're going with Jeremiah Love? And kind of if they end up drafting Jeremiah Love, then I understand the Bellinger decision a lot more. Because, hey, we're getting a tight end that can actually block in the running game. I don't understand. To be honest with you, you were reporting for about a week that the Titans were really trying to re-sign Chig. And to the best of my knowledge, Chig has not gotten snatched up yet. But that they were.
And I've heard that Chig, I heard a couple days ago, Chig was going to push like $11 million. So I was a little surprised that he didn't surface today, because Bellinger for 9 or 8 isn't so bad if Chig's getting 11. So we'll see what happens with him. Where were we going there? I think
with the pick,
I don't know that we get a big signal on the pick yet until we see if they do something either with a running back, 2nd tier running back that would be like with Pollard above Spears, like a 1 and 1A, or with the edge spot. And even if they did something with the edge spot, Jared, I think they want a wave of defensive linemen. This whole thing's going to be keyed by lots and lots of defensive linemen. And so I could see a free agent edge still, and there wasn't a ton of movement with the edges, I don't feel like today, and a drafted edge. And then you'd have two guys for that quote unquote smaller, quicker edge spot to go with Johnson, and I get the idea Femi Oladejo would be with Johnson in that other spot. So if you had Johnson and Femi on that side and two newcomers on the other side, a draft pick and a free agent, then you'd be really solid at edge, end we should be calling it now more so. And I think I get the feeling that's what they're looking for. So I wouldn't take I think Jeremiah Love, maybe with the Chiefs doing what they do, falls a little bit out of what happened today.
French asks, do they still have money left for Trey Hendrickson?
Look, I think they have money. Look, like, again, we haven't done the computations, but I'm sure most of these deals are very friendly. They cost them good money for 2 years, but the way it spreads out cap wise, and then there's still Ridley money to be had if they go that direction. And there's definitely Snead money to be had. And so maybe not as much Snead money, depending on if the health thing that I'm speculating about, which seems, I think, to make a lot of sense, comes to fruition. But I'm more interested in somebody there's mentioning Owe and Pay, guys like that. I think more reasonable price, younger. I could see Hendrickson. I mean, the next 2 years of Hendrickson will be pretty good, I would imagine. But I'd like somebody that you'd be interested in signing twice potentially.
So I want Hendrickson, but I don't know if they want Hendrickson. I think it's going to be like right now. I think that they have that open edge spot, and that's going to be Bailey, Bain, or Reese, where I feel like I sit here today. And to your point, I think they'd be better off in signing somebody. Let's say they sign a Hendrickson. And so they say, okay, we have Hendrickson, Franklin Myers, Simmons, and Johnson. We're going to rotate in Oladejo. Then David Bailey's the top player on the board. He's available. They take him. Now it's like, okay, we're going to rotate Bailey in. We're going to rotate Oladejo in. We're going to rotate Jalen Harrell in. And then I don't think they're asking too much of David Bailey. Whereas if they draft David Bailey and they start him right away, now everybody wants David Bailey to be a great player from the start.
Yeah, that'd be a perfect situation for any of those three guys. I starting to feel like only one of them is going to be there for him the way draftniks are talking, but we'll see. But that would be a perfect situation for any one of those guys to come in. But again, there's some good options out there still free agent wise, more than in a typical year. I feel like in terms of edge/end. Typically, by this time, into the first negotiating day, the few good ones would be snatched up, and today has been not super active at that position. It's weird. Chason, another guy, like, he looked great to me for the Patriots. He was very cheap. His price is obviously going to be up now, but there are a lot of free agents that they could sign that I would say that's a real add. I mean, they're in a hell of an advantageous position when you're filling blank lines in your depth chart. There are a lot of names that look good as opposed to empty space.
Well, so the other thing too, I guess, that I keep going back to is I keep talking about the touchdown scoring. Like, over 17 games, Calvin Ridley averages 8 touchdowns, which is by far the most on this team. As is now Wan'Dale Robinson's 3, DK's 4, Bellinger's 1, Io Manor 4 last year. Like, that's not good enough around Cam, is it? If they really want Cam to be the kind, like, the Patriots went out and got Drake May to go, or got Stephon Diggs to go with Drake May. And Stephon Diggs, sounds like he's just terrible off the field. It sounds like Vrabel hates him, and they didn't want to pay him big money, and he's just terrible off the field. But I feel like they need a better player in that group.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's where, Love becomes a little bit intriguing. and I know TD calls him, look at him as a playmaker, right? He's going to catch balls. He'll get in the end zone. And I can see arguing for him or thinking about him and certainly considering him in that realm. But I will say this, and it was no great designed offense that got NWI into the end zone, 9 times and 37 catches? Nobody's expecting that. You can find people who could score touchdowns, either one guy that has an incredible year like that with the ridiculous hit percentage, or a bunch of guys that get two or three. I mean, I can't imagine that this team doesn't score better than it's been scoring. And if the Titans are going to break through in any kind of capacity where they make any kind of significant shift forward, and I think the defense will be better, but they got to score in the 20s. They got to break out of this 17-point average. And yes, players before plays, right? But I think Brian Daboll's got to be good for 3 points a game to get you from 17 to 20.
The one stat that I guess I looked up and I was surprised at this stat, and I wonder what this means for Jeremiah Love. When Brian Daboll was the head coach in New York, he was 15-15-1 when Saquon Barkley played.
I heard you say this.
And he was 5-25 without Saquon Barkley. And that, it's easy with hindsight to say, well, they should have kept Barkley. But I mean, I guess I think that the running back doesn't have a tremendous amount of value to go with the 4th overall pick. But I think this draft class stinks. And I think that's why, by the way, the Ravens made the deal on Max Crosby, is I think they looked at their board and they saw like 10 guys with first-round grades, and they're picking 14th. And they're like, you know what? That's going to be a second-round player. Let's get Max Crosby for a second-round player. And then hopefully we're picking 28th or 32nd next year anyways. So it'll be 2 second-round players that we end up trading for Max Crosby. But it's like, I'm sitting here saying, if you were that reliant on Saquon Barkley to win, where you were 50% with Saquon Barkley and 25% without Saquon Barkley, maybe you do need Jeremiah Love, especially because it does feel like this roster is being built, especially on offense, in Brian Daboll's likeness. Do you buy into that at all?
I mean, I do and I don't. I mean, I think they need to run the ball successfully for sure, but I think you can run the ball successfully without Jeremiah Love. And I look, you can't go, Bijan Robinson can't go to Atlanta and do it by himself. And, you can't be the Vegas and draft a great running back and count on him to do it by himself. But those teams aren't saying, look, we got a great running back and that's what we're going to lean on offensively, and it's going to take care of business for us. They're not in that kind of position either. I think the Titans, my thinking has been string it along, find a mid-rounder. I'm not big on Pollard. My thing would have been cut Pollard, get the $7 million, spend 13 or 12 on one of these top running backs, though it did close up a little bit. Hall got tagged and Williams re-signed in Dallas. I would have liked to have seen those guys come to market. Titans spend 12 or 13 on one of them, go for 2 years with one of them, get your roster healthy enough that you could get back into drafting an Eddie George or Derrick Henry or Chris Johnson and, go back to kind of your DNA and your roots. I'm averse to spending high value pick on a running back at this stage of the franchise. Probably not a 2-contract guy. And they just, Jared, have not touched end, corner, and receiver high enough, often enough for me to move off of those positions.
According to Pelissero, the Titans are signing former Chiefs corner Josh Williams to a 2-year deal. No money mentioned in the deal. Josh Williams, again, this is like Cordell Flott. I know Watson that got signed by the Rams today. I know McDuffie who got traded to the Rams. I don't really know much about Joshua Williams. Trying to pull up his PFF info, but it sounds to me like, to your point, Paul, when you were like, well, they still need more corners, even though they signed 2 corners, there's the 3rd corner.
And Kansas City, I think, has been decimated. They're going to need some corners now between dealing McDuffie and losing two other guys at least today. We know what their draft priority is going to be. I don't know much about Josh Williams. We'll be studying up on him. I'll write something tonight about him being added to Flott and Taylor. But look, they didn't have a room, and they've got a room of 4 now with Flott, Taylor, Williams, and Harris. And Harris presumably falls to 4th, which is where he belongs.
I mean, again, I guess he didn't play that much last year because it said that he played 17 snaps last year for the Chiefs on defense, according to PFF. And it doesn't look like he's ever really been a starter because in 4 years he's got 1,100 snaps. So I would say that's a little concerning. And then, again, he played in 4 games last year for the Chiefs. So I don't know if I'd sit here and say like, okay, impact guy, but again, he does have a connection with Mike Borgonzi, and it is probably for no money at this point. Apparently the money is out on Trubisky. It's a 2-year, $10.5 million contract, and it is 6.825 guaranteed.
That sounds about right. I mean, for a guy like that. Still don't know what that first year hit is, but it's not going to be painful, obviously.
Do you think they did that with Trubisky because they want Trubisky, who played under Dable in Buffalo, to help Cam along? Or do you think that they think, hey, if something happens to Cam, we want to put Mitch Trubisky in there instead of Will Levis?
Well, it's got to be both, but it's probably more the first. I don't know if teams admit it behind closed doors, but if your starting quarterback goes down and you don't have, one of a small handful of guys, you're generally screwed. Small handful of guys. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo, Mac Jones did very well this last season, but heck, we thought they had one in Cincinnati. And he played last year and was terrible. And I think I read today that he's available.
Yep. Didn't get tendered.
And once upon a time, he would have drawn something in a trade. They kept him because they thought he was good, because he had been good, but it's not good anymore. Hasn't been good in his most recent chance.
Dave Wilbert says no impact signings. This team will suck again. Your thoughts?
Well, look, not every guy is going to be impact. They need 22 guys plus. Robinson, a starter. Bellinger, a starter in too tight. Franklin Myers, a starter. Flott and Taylor, starters. I mean, I don't know how you could say starters are not impact people. They're going to have plenty of chances to make impact. If you're only looking for guys who have been high impact players somewhere else, I mean, I think Alontae Taylor had a lot to do with some Saints success last year. Certainly, he made some plays against the Titans. He also got beat by Mason Kinsey, a play that's burned into my mind because Mason Kinsey doesn't make plays. Franklin Myers is a playmaker. I mean, if you're not somebody that watches defensive tackle play, you might not know it. But again,
does Franklin Myers give you Autry vibes?
It's not the right play. Yeah, a little bit. I don't think I would hope he doesn't have to move so much, that they'll be well stocked enough that, I mean, you might move them schematically, but not out of necessity.
So my thing is, I think Franklin Myers is an impact player, and I think Alontae Taylor is an impact player, though I just don't think that corners have the kind of impact, and that's just a me versus corner thing more than anything else. I do agree, though, in theory, in principle, with the original message, which is I am kind of worried this team's going to suck again next year. And I don't mean like they don't make the playoffs so they suck. I mean, like, I'm worried this is going to be another 3 or 4 win team.
Way too early to say. I need to see who they draft, see what else they do here, and see how they coach. See what these guys look. You remember training camp last year, and a lot of us had the feeling that there was just a flatness something missing, and nobody would acknowledge it or say anything about it. We had a coach and even front office people who wouldn't go there, were either blind to it or in denial. I don't expect to feel that this time around. I think they've got experienced head coach and coordinators and a new staff that are going to bring a different life and feel and vibe. And if they do, their players will be growing in different ways, and there'll be a new potential for different results. And in that instance, even if they're not, I think they're already potentially better personnel wise. But as you get better personnel wise, and if that stuff happens, then there you get the kind of progress that was slow coming from Cam last year, out of more people and at a faster rate. And that leads you from 3 wins to 7, maybe by itself. Also a lack of a ridiculously bad schedule. And then the Colts all of a sudden don't have Daniel Jones, and you don't face them twice in the early part of the season when they're good, and some of the breaks go your way and stuff. And it feels like they're due for like an adjustment on some of this, a market adjustment. And so, look, I'm not one to make big predictions, and certainly not in early March, but I think they're due in a lot of ways, and a lot of things are going on that would suggest they'll get back more towards at least mediocre.
So I think the other thing too is just my lack of belief in Cam. I think this, like, I kind of compare this to people who are pro-life and pro-choice. If you know somebody who is staunchly pro-life and staunchly pro-choice, and I'm sure everybody knows somebody that's like, those two people are never going to convince the other one of what's what. And so, like, I just don't see it with Cam. Like, I see the highlight reel plays that are Mahomes-esque, and I'm like, that you can't coach that into a guy. That ability to run around and then throw a ball 30 yards the other side of the field, and it hits the guy right in the hands. And he did that about 5 or 6 times last year. But he's not accurate enough for me. He doesn't have those elite physical traits. He's not an elite athlete. I don't think that he's accurate with the football. I don't think he's tall enough to see over taller defensive linemen. I just don't see it with Cam. So if I'm building a team to win with Cam, I almost want to baby him to the point that it's like, hey, we just need you to make a couple throws here and there, but we're going to run the ball with Jeremiah Love, and we're going to put together a great defense, which is what got Blake Bortles to an AFC title game, an unbelievable defense, and Leonard Fournette running the ball. That's how I would do it. I feel like they're like the staunch opposite of me, which is they think Cam is going to blossom this year into a franchise quarterback. And I just don't see it. Like, do they think, hey, Wan'Dale Robinson, Calvin Ridley, and Io Manor and DK, and you watch, Cam will be Mahomes next year?
Robert Saleh did not talk like a guy who thinks that Cam Ward is going to be a star this year. When those of us who carry notebooks and not cameras for the most part sat with him for 15 minutes after his press conference, talked a lot about Clark Kent and not Superman, and convincing him that they need Superman only occasionally and that Clark Kent would be just fine. Now, and you mentioned Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette was fine and did good things there, but that's evidence to my side. You don't need Jeremiah Love. Now, Leonard Fournette might have been overdrafted or didn't live up to his draft billing, but you can find somebody that can do what Leonard Fournette did outside of number 4, I think. Now, Dayball came in and kind of was more pro Superman, right? But I think that offensive coordinator's got to be more of a cheerleader for your quarterback, while the head coach is more pulling back the reins and managing the whole game and saying, hey, let the defense and the run game take a lot of weight off of this guy, while the coordinator says, no, let's let him go. Let's let him go. And I think they'll be push and pull on that. I don't expect Cam Ward to be a star this year. And I understand all of your points, which are all valid, and you make in a much more reasonable, sensible way in a conversation like this than you generally do. But he's got some things in him that are promising that make me say, hey, let's see him better coached, better surrounded. And it seems like for how few good quarterbacks there are out there across the league, that this guy might be able to manage some things going forward, splash in some really impressive, explosive plays, and lead a team well. He's not a baby who gets down on himself or down on things when things don't go his way. He rolls with stuff in a way that's very healthy for a team. And he's got some of these intangible qualities that a lot of quarterbacks just don't have, who may have better arms and be more accurate and everything, but don't have it upstairs. And I think he's got some things upstairs that are very important, and that his game has a skill set that could be good enough for him to win. And I'm anxious to see the growth.
I think Cam has all the intangibles, and I think the Titans are caught up on that. My problem, I think, are the tangibles. Like if we talk about it this time of year when a guy has unbelievable measurables, and it's like, right, but does he have it up here to be the quarterback? I think Cam's got it up here, and I think he's got it in here to be the quarterback. I don't think Levis had it up here. I think Levis, I'm a little torn on Levis here with the heart, because I do feel like Levis quit on the team last year. And when it comes to guys like Malik Willis today signing his contract, I'm really happy for Malik Willis. I have a lot of respect for Malik Willis. I never saw this coming when Malik Willis was with the Titans. But the one thing Malik Willis never did was Malik Willis never quit. Like, he never quit. Even if they drafted Levis, he didn't quit. Even when they signed Mason Rudolph, he didn't quit. And so I give him credit. Mac Jones never quit. And that's why he had the success he had. Sam Darnold never quit. And I felt like Levis quit last year. And that's why I say that I know Levis doesn't have it up here in the head. I just don't know if Levis has it here in the heart. And I think he probably doesn't. I think Cam's totally got it up here in the head and totally here in the heart. I just don't know if Cam is good enough, to be the kind of quarterback that if you're going to take him number one and you're going to unretire Warren Moon's number 4 and say, like, this guy will lead us with our new uniforms into our new stadium, into the promised land. I just don't know that Cam has the ability to do that. Whereas there are other guys that I think have the ability and haven't made it with the ability.
I think it's too early to say, but I think there are indications that he might have the ability. The Malik Willis thing, just a quick aside. I mean, and you saw him practice too. I mean, and Kurt Warner did a great breakdown. I mean, they're like 28 snaps of that are worth judging in Kurt Warner's eyes, where you throw out the other stuff that isn't as meaningful. And to sign a guy off 28 snaps and it wasn't as much as maybe some people were thinking, but it's a lot of money. It's a lot of hope off 28 snaps. I'll be surprised if he makes it, and things are going to have to be super structured for him. Super structured.
I was stunned that somebody, especially a team that's made so many bad financial decisions and it looked like they were tanking in the Dolphins. I was stunned that the Dolphins stepped up and paid that money. I thought a team like Arizona was going to sign him to what's really amounts to like a 1-year, $15 million contract to say, hey, you're going to start, but we'll see where it goes.
That would be the right approach.
Malik has 155 pass attempts in his career. Matt Flynn, who is the gold standard in this century of signing a contract based off of one game, had 300 career pass attempts when he signed with Seattle. That's double the amount of pass attempts that Malik Willis had.
That's still not enough.
And I mean, again, it looks like we know the Dolphins owner likes to tank, and they're certainly building a team that is capable of tanking if Quinn Ewers is the quarterback. And they're going to pay Malik. Again, there's a lot of things, Paul, that happened today that I'm like, I don't know if I understand some of these moves that other teams do. Whereas I feel like the Titans have just gone and said, hey, we're just going to try to get as many starting players as possible. And again, when it comes to guys like Flott and Taylor, those are NFL starters. And when you suck as bad as the Titans do, you have to pay the suck tax. So at least I kind of understand that. I think I would have rather, and I really hate holes, but I think I would have rather gone big and paid the money on a Linderbaum, though if maybe the Raiders would have even gone higher if you try to get into their price range. But I think I would have gone, big money for a Hendrickson or something, and then gone cheap at corner, gone cheap at tight end with guys that I don't want instead of signing market value for guys that I do want at those positions.
I don't know. I mean, everybody was asking me, like, are they going to go big for a couple names or fill in with mid? I don't think they had to make a choice one way or the other. And a couple of these contracts are, top of market. So they have gone big, just maybe not with names as big as people like.
So this one guy says Simmons next to Franklin Myers and Jermaine Johnson plus a draft and these corners plus Salah on defense. No way this team sucks.
Well, that's the optimistic view. It's hope season. I mean, I think the defense, Robert Saleh puts together good defenses. The question to me is if he can do it in a year or if it takes 2 years. And so that's largely a question about how good is he at shaping the defense and just how good are they collectively at identifying people like we're talking about, like Cordell Flatt. Now, the Giants wanted Cordell Flatt. There's a story out there. I wish I could remember who tweeted it. I think it was one of the Giants guys who said, he was on the verge of re-signing with the Giants, and Saleh made a last-minute pitch that really spelled out what they wanted him to do here precisely and all of that. So if the Titans really wanted him and he turns out to be a good player for them, that'll be a great story. The Titans' last-minute sales pitch that tore him away from re-signing with his original team. And if he turns out to be a bust here, that'll be a real story also.
I just remember that year that the Titans were the number 1 seed, and there was like a 6-game period because Bud Dupree was always hurt, but there was a 6-game period or whatever where they had Dupree, Autry, Landry, and Simmons all healthy. And that reminded me of the old days of Curse and Carter and Hainsworth and Vandenbosch. And I think if they get one more guy, they could be that this year, knowing that they're going to do what they did with Curse and those guys, which was say, hey, you go let it rip, and then you come to the sideline, and we're going to put Joe Salavea and Henry Ford and Carlos Hall in the game, and they're going to say, hey, you guys go let it rip, and then we're going to put Oladejo in, and we're going to put Jalen Harrell in, and we're going to put these guys in. I think they have the potential to do that, but I think they have to get one more guy, and I just am cautious about banking on one of these rookies to be that guy on day one.
Well, he's probably not that guy on day one. Where is he in week 8? If in week 8 you're saying, hey, that guy's really coming on, and if in year 2 he's fully a part of what you're talking about, then I think you've done fine. Is that what you want out of the 4th pick in the draft? No, but that's not on the Titans. That's on this draft. It's just not a great top 10. And, everybody's screwed that's up there. It's just a bad year. I really wish there was somebody at number 4 that was a clear cut, like a couple guys that were clear cut, like, oh, you can't go wrong taking those guys, and there's no questions about them. And they're prototypical guy for the position. That they're not, there's a question about all 3 of them. They pretty much, I guess Bain didn't acknowledge it so much because his is physical, but Bailey said, yeah, I need to be better against the run. And Reese said, I'm an end, but they're unproven in those situations, certainly in the NFL. And if you're going with Bain, you're believing that production trumps all of the measurables, which it can, but you'd rather take a guy where production's going to trump the measurables at a number that's a lot bigger than 4.
What do we think about center? Do we think that they signed their starting center in Austin Schlottman, or do we think, and again, Schlottman 2 years up to $9 million, 3.5 guaranteed. It seems like kind of Daniel Brunskill money right there, which Brunskill, they did sign to start, and then he was a backup. Do we think that this is their starting center, or do we think
I mean, he's their starting center if he comes in and kicks ass, depending on what the competition level is. But I won't be surprised at all if they sign somebody over top of him, so to speak, or, if he winds up in a competition with somebody like Jackson Slater or Jackson Slater plus somebody else, he'd have to play very, very well to win it. It's not an ideal scenario for them. And certainly you don't want, if you had one of those between center and right guard where you had three guys slugging it out in a more traditional, less and less often taking place training camp competition, that'd be all right. You can't have it at center and at right guard. So, they're definitely due. I would definitely still expect them to add somebody of note for one of those two positions. And there are plenty of candidates out there. I'd hate for it to be a draft priority because, again, I'm obsessed with addressing edge/end, wide receiver, and cornerback. So if you're giving me a fourth round guard who you think is going to start day one, fine. I think those are less frequent entries into the league these days. It's not like Zach Pillar, Benji Olsen times.
But you know what's crazy, though, about like the Zach Pillar, Benji Olsen days? Those guys sat the bench for a year, and they actually went to training camp and wore pads, and they practiced harder than they practice now. And I think it's incredibly difficult to develop offensive linemen in the NFL today because they never really practice it. And so they don't play in the preseason. So if you draft a guy in the fourth round, like let's say Slater, Slater needs to get every single rep in the preseason. And then he got 18 game reps this past year. How much better could he have gotten in practice with 10 padded practices during the course of the year?
Yeah. They like his development, but yeah, it's in the context of what you're saying as compared to Zach and Benji, who had a lot more. I will say Saleh, when he hired Carmen Brasillo, pointed out, and he was talking about all his coaches, but he was talking particularly about Brasillo, who, everybody can coach a first rounder. I want guys to coach third day picks and undrafted free agents. And Brasillo's had success with those kind of guys.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Coach. Bill Callahan did too until he got here.
They couldn't coach Evan Neal. For whatever reason, and they couldn't coach up Evan Neal with the Giants. Let's get the first rounders and the guys that they're paying money to. Let's get those guys coached up first because Dan Moore needs some coaching up, and J.C. Latham needs some coaching up, and whoever they're going to put probably at right guard is going to need some coaching up before we start saying, I want the guy who can coach up the undrafted free agents. That's kind of the opposite of what Nick Saban says, where he says, I never coached a bad player to play well. I only coach good players to play better. But maybe he and Nick Saban are different kinds of coaches.
Zeitler, by the way, I don't think Zeitler, there's nothing to indicate that Zeitler's dead, So unless Zeitler's decided he doesn't want to play, and that would come out at some point. But I don't imagine there's a big market for Zeitler. They like Zeitler. It's not a long-term answer, but you could do worse than Kevin Zeitler at right guard for another year. Calming influence on Latham would cure one of those positions. And then if you have a fight for center, so be it.
What do you think about Gunnar Helm? Do you think they view Gunnar Helm today as a starting tight end?
I don't know that they would have to declare one of the two a starter. They could either rotate them or have Helm or Bellinger in for specific packages when they're in one tight end. I do think they will play more two tight end, which will be interesting and create wrinkles that they weren't able to do before with Chig. And unlike Zeitler, Chig is out of the picture now, unless he just absolutely fell flat on his face in the market and was worth far, far less than projected. But they're moving on with this move.
The problem with Chig is that he's a one-trick pony. And he's really good with the ball in his hands. About every 6 games, Chig Okonkwo makes a play that makes me think, wow. Like he had that touchdown catch in Chicago week 1 in 24 where he went over the guy's back and saved a Levis interception and turned it into a touchdown. He had the one screen Callahan drew up against the Texans where he ran it 80 yards into the end zone. He had the catch at the end of the Texan game this year when Cam was trying to lead them, coming down the field to try to win the game. He always has a couple of those plays a season, but he never is consistent enough, and he can't block worth a shit. So he's really a wide receiver playing tight end, and he's not good enough to be the kind of wide receiver playing tight end that can't block worth a shit. That's why I always thought, there's always teams that do stupid stuff, but I always thought the idea of Chig signing a big deal was a little far-fetched.
Yeah, his highlights are awesome. But I always thought the same thing. I was surprised when I learned that they were trying to keep him. But I think that had to boil down, right, to Daboll watching him with the ball in his hands and saying, well, I mean, yeah, I want that. If I can have that, I want that. Then if I can't, then we'll go the more traditional route, which I like too. But I can't tell you don't re-sign the guy that can run like that with the ball in his hands. I could certainly draw some stuff up that'll get us plays out of that.
When do you think we'll be able to know how much money the Titans have to spend the rest of the week and the offseason and everything else? Do you think we'll have that by Wednesday, Thursday? When do you think we'll get an idea of how much more active they can be?
I think we'll have a good sense of it by like Thursday, Friday, but I bet you there's one of these deals that just like lingers out there that doesn't come in for whatever reason. I mean, it won't make or break us having a sense of it, but it'll be like a whole missing puzzle piece.
By the way, I just want to,
it feels like it usually goes to me.
PK, I just want to take a second to something I cannot get over, which is, and I'm not putting this on Brinker, but he's certainly at least a co-conspirator here. But remember when Brinker did that sit down with Mike Keith and Ramon Foster with the Titans podcast about how great things were going to be with this new regime of Ran Carthon and Callahan, and, that they are collaborating so great and everything's so awesome. And he talked about the AI injury model, which I made so much fun of. But he talked about how, hey, we just want to save the owner a couple $1 million. That can be a game changer by being able to predict injuries and blah, 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 blah. They are guaranteeing L'Jarius Sneed $7.5 million for injury when everybody knew that he had some sort of a bum knee in year 3 of a 4-year deal. How could Ran Carthon and to a certain extent Chad Brinker have thought that was a good idea?
On the one hand, I don't understand it. On the other hand, I suspect there are some protections built in there that are less talked about and less public.
PK, your closing thought after day 1 of free agency. I mean, I guess deals can still come in, but your closing thought of the day overall in the Titans, where they stand right now.
Well, this depth chart was filled with holes, and it's got far fewer holes. I still think they need an end in the starting lineup. I still think obviously center and right guard are issues, but those are far fewer issues that they had at 11 o'clock on Monday morning before they could start reaching agreements with these guys. And so I think we'll do a lot of debating about how good some of them are, and we need to see them on the practice field and in games to get a sense of that. But they have NFL starting caliber guys at some of these positions, some of whom there seems to be reason to expect will grow and blossom under the good coaching they have. Some of whom I think are high quality players. Franklin Myers is a high quality player. I think Alontae Taylor is promising, and I think Wan'Dale Robinson should be a really good player for Cam Ward. So, if I were a Titans fan, I don't see how you could not be excited about all the action that goes on today. Same time, I don't think the scorecard for teams that come out blazing on the first day of free agency is very good. So I'd be a little wary about that.
I will say this. Seattle got their quarterback in free agency. New England came out blazing last year in free agency, and they ended up in the Super Bowl. Whatever you want to make of that. Here's what I'd say, just my final take, PK. Sign Hendrickson, get a right guard, and draft Jeremiah Love, and then do whatever the hell you want, and I'll be happy with it. But I don't think they're going to do it.
You're not going to be happy. Come on.
If they sign Hendrickson and a right guard, like if they sign Hendrickson and they sign Zeitler, and then they draft Jeremiah Love, then take whatever you want to take in the second. I'm fine with the pass catchers they have if they've got Jeremiah Love and a right guard, because I'm going to run the shit out of the ball and I'm going to play defense. And if you want to draft whoever in the second round, third round, I don't care. If you go into the year and you're telling me that Femi Oladejo is starting at one of those in positions, I'm going to go crazy. Yeah. If you're trying to sell me on, hey, Spears and Pollard, we're going to run the ball with them, I'm going to go crazy. That's where I sit.
They know that they can't. I'm not positive that run game scenario is not going to happen. I feel pretty secure that Femi Oladejo is not a starting defensive lineman on opening day.
Thank you to Sinkers Beverages, the presenting sponsor of this program. They are your local emporium for the fine liquors and beers, craft beers, and THC drinks and everything else. Again, go with a local company. That's Sinkers Beverages. They are a very local company. The Paul Kuharsky podcast. Will we have multiple podcasts this week? PK, what are we doing?
Yeah, we'll just see how things unfold, and I may do a pop-up some point during the week. If you're a member of paulkuharsky.com, you get a text message about those. So that's another feature of membership. And then regularly scheduled Friday, probably 11 a.m.-ish. Stay tuned. Jared, pleasure. Good job. Thank you.
Always enjoy a little Stilly and Polly every now and then. That's it for us. Like and subscribe, and wherever you get your podcasts.